Evan finished his shift with shaking hands and tired eyes. The factory bell rang, loud and sharp, cutting through the noise of machines and voices. Workers moved fast toward the exit gates, all of them wanting the same thing: food, rest, and a little silence. Evan pulled his jacket tight and checked the time on his wrist screen. He was late. Very late. The transport window would close soon, and if he missed it, he would be stuck on the station for another cycle. He began to run. The space station was old. Its metal halls were narrow and worn smooth by millions of boots. Lights flickered above him. Signs flashed directions in faded letters: cargo bay, transit dock, crew access. Evan followed the crowd, breathing hard. He did not look closely at the signs. He only saw the word departure and turned left. A large ship waited at the dock. Its hull was dark, almost black, with no bright colors or clear markings. The door was open, and a line of workers was moving inside. Evan joined them without thinking. The door slid shut behind him with a deep sound that felt too heavy for a normal transport. Evan frowned but said nothing. He found a seat near the wall and leaned back, closing his eyes. The ship moved. At first, everything felt normal. A low hum filled the cabin as engines powered up, but the hum was slow and deep, like a heartbeat. Evan opened his eyes. The cabin was dim. The lights were not bright white like usual ships. They glowed faintly, pulsing in a slow rhythm. Bright, then darker, then bright again. Evan looked around. The other passengers sat very still. Too still. Some stared forward without blinking. Others kept their heads down, hands tight in their laps. No one spoke. A strange smell reached Evan's nose. It was old and dry, like cold dust and metal that had been sealed for a long time. It made his throat feel tight. The ship shuddered, and the engines grew louder. Evan checked his wrist screen again. No signal. That was strange. Even in deep space, there was usually some connection. A soft voice filled the cabin, not from speakers, but from everywhere at once. Departure complete. That was all it said. No destination. No travel time. Evan's stomach tightened. He stood up slowly and walked toward the front of the cabin. A crew member stood near a closed door. The man's uniform was dark gray with no clear symbol. His face was pale, and his eyes looked dull, as if he had not slept in days. "Excuse me," Evan said. "Where is this ship going?" The man did not answer at first. He stared at Evan for a long moment. Then he spoke in a flat voice. "You are not listed." Evan blinked. "What do you mean?" The crew member leaned closer. His voice dropped low. "You should not be here." Before Evan could reply, the lights dimmed further. A low sound moved through the walls like something shifting deep inside the ship. The crew member stepped back and turned away. Evan's heart began to race. He tried to open the door behind the crew member, but it would not respond. He pressed the control panel again and again. Nothing. A woman seated nearby whispered, "It's locked now." She was older, with short hair and sharp eyes. "Locked?" Evan asked. "Why?" Mara swallowed. "'Cause it knows." Evan did not like the way she said that. The ship moved faster. The hum became stronger. The pulsing lights matched the rhythm exactly. Bright, dark, bright. Evan felt it then. A pressure in his head. Not pain, but awareness. Like someone standing very close behind him, watching. He spun around. Nothing was there. A whisper brushed his thoughts. So small, so loud inside. Evan gasped and clutched his head. The whisper faded, leaving his thoughts shaking. Mara watched him closely. "You heard it, didn't you?" Evan nodded slowly. "What is this ship?" he asked. Mara hesitated, then spoke. "It's a carrier. Not for cargo, not for people. It carries something old." Evan laughed once, sharp and nervous. "That's not funny." "I am not joking," Mara said. "This ship feeds something that has been asleep for a very long time." A scream echoed from somewhere deep in the ship. It cut off suddenly. Several passengers looked up, fear breaking through their blank faces. One man stood and ran toward the rear door. He pounded on it, shouting. The lights flared bright. The walls moved. Not fast. Not violent. They shifted inward, closing space like ribs tightening around a lung. The man screamed as the wall touched him. Then he was gone. No blood, no sound. Just empty space where he had been. Silence returned. Evan could barely breathe. His legs shook. His mind screamed that this could not be real. Mara whispered, "It's awake." The pressure in Evan's head returned, stronger now. Images flashed through his mind. Darkness. Cold. Endless waiting. Hunger that stretched across centuries. A voice entered his thoughts, slow and deep. Living thing. Evan fell to his knees. The voice pressed closer, tasting his fear. Different. The ship shook, as if something deep inside had turned. Mara grabbed Evan's arm and pulled him up. "You need to stay with me," she said. "If it focuses on you alone, you won't last." "Last how?" Evan asked, his voice shaking. Mara did not answer. They moved through the cabin toward a side corridor. The walls seemed to watch them. The floor vibrated under their feet. As they walked, Evan noticed symbols carved into the metal walls. Not writing, marks. Deep scratches that looked old. Very old. "What happened here?" Evan asked. Mara's voice was low. 500 years ago, this thing fed too much. It almost destroyed itself. So it slept. "And ships like this keep it alive until it wakes again." "And now?" Evan asked. "Now it's hungry," the whisper returned, sharper this time. So noisy. So bright. Evan pressed his hands over his ears, but the voice was inside him. "Why do you fight? I don't even know what you are," Evan whispered. The voice paused. That made it worse. Mara stopped suddenly. She pointed ahead. A crew member lay on the floor, unmoving. His eyes were open, empty. The walls near him were dark, stained with something that looked like burned metal. Mara stepped back. "We can't go this way." The lights pulsed faster now. The ship's heartbeat quickened. Evan felt something else beneath the fear. Anger. Not his own. The thing was confused. Hard mind. The voice pressed again, trying to dig deeper. Pain flashed through Evan's head, sharp and sudden. He cried out but stayed standing. Memories rushed up. Work? Hunger. Long nights. Fighting to survive. The voice recoiled. Hurt. Evan gasped. He realized something then. It was not strong. Not yet. Mara stared at him. "What did you do?" "I don't know," Evan said. "It tried to get inside me, and it didn't like what it found." The ship groaned. Somewhere far away, metal tore. The voice returned, colder now. "You are not food." Evan met Mara's eyes. "It knows I don't belong." Mara nodded slowly. "Then it will decide what to do with you." The ship changed course. Evan felt it in his bones. The hum shifted. The pressure grew. The doors behind them sealed shut with a heavy sound. Ahead, the corridor stretched into darkness. The voice whispered, "One last thing, clear and full of promise. Stay alive. I will come again." The lights went dark, and the ship carried them deeper into space. Evan and Mara moved slowly through the corridor, their footsteps soft on the metal floor. The darkness was thick, almost solid. The ship groaned around them, moving as if it were breathing. Every so often a low vibration ran through the walls, sending shivers down their spines. The walls were no longer smooth. Deep cracks and strange twisting shapes ran along the metal. It was as if the ship itself had grown over centuries, alive in ways Evan could not understand. Light came in pulses from cracks above and below, revealing fleeting glimpses of the strange carvings etched into the walls. They looked like claws, or maybe symbols from an old language long forgotten. Mara held a small light in her hand. The beam shook as she moved, illuminating something long and dark along the side of the corridor. Evan stepped closer. It was a hatch, partially open, with strange machinery inside. Wires coiled like living things, and faint steam hissed from the corners. The smell was stronger here, old and bitter. "This way," Mara whispered. She grabbed his arm and pulled him past the hatch. "We have to keep moving." Evan tried to steady his breathing. Every step made him more aware of the silence around them. There were no engines now, only the low hum in the walls and the ship's pulse. The pulse felt different. It was heavier, slower, and somehow full of hunger. "Do you know what it is?" Evan asked. His voice was small. "The thing inside the ship?" Mara shook her head. "Not fully. My parents worked in research on old ships like this. They called it the hunger. Something ancient, something alive. It consumes energy, life, memory. It doesn't eat in a way we understand. It feeds on everything a being has inside." Evan swallowed hard. "So, we're food."
Mara's eyes flashed. "Not exactly."
"It tries to feed on fear and thought. That is why it is so dangerous to panic. If it senses courage or unpredictability, it struggles. That's why you surprised it before." Evan's stomach tightened. "I surprised it? I don't even know what I did." "You survived," Mara said simply. "Most do not." They are gone before they can scream. Evan looked at the corridor ahead. It stretched into darkness that seemed endless. The walls pulsed now, following their movement. Light flashed, showing shadows that were not theirs. Shapes moved at the edge of his vision, disappearing when he turned to look. Something clicked ahead. The sound was mechanical, like a gate unlocking. Then a deep groan echoed. The corridor ahead opened into a larger chamber. The ceiling was tall and curved, with long beams that twisted like roots. The floor was uneven, broken in some places. Strange metal containers leaned at odd angles, covered in dust and dark stains. Mara stopped. Wait! Evan froze. A shadow moved across the chamber. It was tall, taller than any human. It shifted, bending as if the light had made it liquid. It paused and turned its head. There was no face, only a black void where eyes might have been. Evan felt its attention on him, like a hand gripping his mind. The air grew colder. Mara gripped his arm. Do not move alone. Do not speak, unless I speak first. The shadow stepped forward. The floor creaked, metal bending beneath its weight. It did not run. It did not hurry. It waited, patient and slow. Evan felt the pulse again, this time faster, heavier. His heart raced. The shadow stopped at the center of the room. It turned, the void of its face focusing on him. Then it vanished, leaving a silence that felt louder than before. What was that? Evan whispered. Mara did not answer. She moved toward one of the containers. It was large, heavy, and made of a black metal that absorbed the light. She pressed her hand against it, feeling for vibrations. It is testing us, she said finally. It wants to know how we react. Every step, every thought, it senses. Evan took a step back. How do we fight something that can feel our minds? Mara shook her head. We don't fight it, not directly. We survive it. And maybe, just maybe, we trick it. Evan looked around. The chamber had more than one exit. Each led into darkness. The shadows in the corners were growing, stretching. He felt something moving in the floor, subtle but deliberate. The ship was alive in more ways than he understood. Look, Mara said. She pointed to a wall panel. Faint blue symbols blinked slowly. Old logs. Perhaps we can learn something. Evan moved closer. The panel opened under Mara's hand. A screen flickered to life, showing a series of images. Ships, long dead. Humans and other species, some twisted, some gone completely. Notes, in a language he did not recognize, scrolled down the screen. Then the text switched to something he could read. Dates, events, names of passengers who were never recovered. Each line ended the same way. Consumed, vanished, disappeared. Evan felt his stomach drop. It has been doing this for hundreds of years. Mara nodded. And it has not eaten fully in a long time. That is why it is awake now, and why it noticed you. Evan pressed his hand against his forehead. Oh, we are next? Mara looked at him with sharp eyes. Not if we can learn enough to survive. The panel beeped. A new file opened. It showed the interior of the ship in motion. Doors sealing, corridors changing. The ship itself seemed to map its own paths. Then a name appeared. The Hunger Vessel. Under it. Active 500-year cycle. Evan stepped back. It's alive. The ship itself. It moves to feed. Mara nodded. And it remembers. That is worse. Every human it has ever encountered, every fear it has consumed, it knows. It is patient because it can wait. And it will not stop. A low vibration ran through the chamber again. The pulse of the ship. The air thickened. Evan felt the pressure in his head return, stronger than before. Thoughts that were not his began to appear. Dark, twisted, alien. He tried to push them away, but they clung, brushing his mind, testing him. Mara reached for his hand. Focus on something human. Anything that cannot be predicted. Fear and panic are its food. If it cannot feed, it cannot control. Evan tried. He thought of the factory. His long hours, the machines, the buzzing lights. He thought of the meals he shared with friends, no matter how small. He focused on anger, stubbornness, survival. The alien thoughts recoiled slightly. Pulse slowed, less oppressive. The shadow returned. It hovered near a corner just at the edge of the light. It stretched, bending reality around it, but it did not strike. It observed. Waiting. Why isn't it attacking? Evan asked. Because it cannot understand you fully, Mara said. Humans are messy, unpredictable. That is why you survived before. That is why you can survive now. Evan swallowed. Can it die? Mara looked at him, her face serious. I don't know. It is old. Older than any species alive. Maybe it cannot. Maybe we can only avoid it. Or maybe we can trick it into something it does not expect. The walls pulsed faster. Shadows stretched longer. The air was thick. The ship moved again, a deep groan echoing from its core. The pressure in Evan's mind grew, forcing him to his knees. His thoughts spun, memories overlapping with alien whispers. It smelled of iron and something worse. Old hunger. Centuries of it. Mara knelt beside him. Hold on, she said. Do not give it anything. Not fear. Not pain. Not memory. Evan's vision blurred. He felt the pull again, deeper than before. The voice entered, this time clearer, sharper. It tasted his defiance. It wanted to know why he resisted. It wanted to consume, to erase, to fold him into its endless hunger. But Evan clung to simple thoughts. Survival. Anger. Stubbornness. Memories of home. The things no machine, no ancient entity, no hunger could predict. The pressure eased slightly. The shadow in the corner flickered, uncertain. Mara grabbed his hand again. We need to move. Now. They rose slowly. The corridor ahead split in two. One path led downward into a spiral of darkness. The other sloped upward toward faint light. Evan hesitated. Which way? He asked. Mara studied both paths. The light, she said. It may lead to the bridge or the core. Somewhere we can see what we face. They stepped forward together. The ship shifted under their feet. A sound like metal grinding, tearing, echoed around them. The lights flickered, and for a moment Evan saw dozens of shadows moving along the walls. Faces, arms, shapes. None human. All watching. All waiting. Evan's heart pounded. His hand clutched Mara's tightly. Fear wanted to rise, but he pushed it down. If fear fed the hunger, he could not give it what it wanted. His mind became a shield of simple thoughts. Moving, surviving, breathing, resisting. The spiral staircase loomed above them, the light weak but constant. Evan and Mara climbed carefully. Each step felt heavy, as if the ship itself resisted their movement. The pulse of hunger followed them, vibrating in their bones, whispering in their minds, testing, probing, hungry. At last, they reached the top. A chamber opened before them. It was large, round, and full of machinery that hummed with power. Strange tubes stretched from the walls to a central core, glowing faintly with a cold blue light. The pulse here was different, stronger, almost like the heartbeat of a living being. Evan realized something. This was the heart of the ship, the hunger's home. The voice entered his mind again. It was deeper, older, hungrier. Fresh. You are mine. Evan held his ground. Mara whispered, remember who you are. Remember human. The lights pulsed. The shadows bent closer. The chamber seemed to stretch forever. The hunger waited, and for the first time, Evan felt something stir inside him, a spark that refused to be consumed. The ship had awakened. The hunger had noticed him, and it was patient. But Evan was not ready to give in. Not yet. Evan and Mara stood at the edge of the glowing chamber, their eyes fixed on the central core. Strange tubes and cables ran from the walls into the glowing mass, and the pulse of the ship throbbed like a living heart. The air was thick with energy, almost solid, and it pressed against their skin. Every step they took echoed loudly, though no sound came from elsewhere. The ship itself seemed to be holding its breath. Evan looked at Mara. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp and focused. What is it? He whispered. Mara swallowed and shook her head. I don't know exactly. It's alive, and it thinks. It can sense everything. Fear, hope, pain, memory. And it learns. That is why it has lasted 500 years. Evan swallowed hard. 500 years. The thought made his stomach twist. So it remembers everything it has ever consumed? Mara nodded. Yes, every species, every mind. And it adapts. It has never faced humans before, not like this. That is why it is struggling with you. Evan frowned. Me? Why me? Humans are different, Mara said quietly. We are chaotic, emotional. Our thoughts are messy. Fear, hope, courage, anger, all mixed together. Most species are orderly, predictable, easy to consume. But humans are not. The chamber pulsed again, faster this time, and a low voice echoed in Evan's mind. It was everywhere and nowhere. Slow, deep, hungry. Curious? Defiant, so defiant? Why? Evan's head throbbed, but he forced himself to think of simple things. Breathing, movement, survival. He could feel the hunger probing, testing his mind, trying to understand. His thoughts were messy, full of contradictions, hard for the entity to digest. See? Mara said. It doesn't understand you fully. It doesn't know what to do. That gives us time. Evan nodded, though fear still clawed at him. Time for what? Mara stepped closer to the core. To learn it. To see how it moves. To survive. She pointed to a panel near the wall. Look, these controls, old but still active. Maybe we can find a way to influence it, confuse it, or slow it down. Evan approached the panel. The screen flickered to life, showing the map of the ship's interior. Corridors twisted and shifted as if the ship was alive. The hunger moved within the walls, the pulse faster near certain points. Some corridors glowed red, others blue. The pattern was not random. The ship was hunting, and they were the prey. Evan pressed his hand against the panel. It's intelligent. It knows where we are. Mara nodded. Yes. And it is learning from us. Every move we make, every reaction, every thought, it records. We have to be careful. Evan's stomach churned. And if it catches us? Mara's jaw tightened. Then we disappear, like the others. She gestured to the dark corners of the chamber where shadows seemed to bend and twist. It doesn't just kill. It consumes. Everything. Mind, body, memory. We would cease to exist. The pulse grew stronger, vibrating through the floor. Evan felt it in his bones. The voice entered again, sharper this time, tasting his resistance. Fragile, delicate, defiant. Interesting. Evan gritted his teeth. He focused on breathing, on the sensations of his own body, on the stubborn will to survive. The hunger recoiled again, as if surprised that it could not penetrate fully. Mara grabbed his arm. We need to move. The longer we stay here, the more it probes. We must find a place where it cannot reach us so easily. They moved cautiously through the chamber, stepping over wires and broken panels. The lights pulsed, showing glimpses of shadows moving at the edges. Evan felt a pressure in his mind again, but this time he resisted. He imagined simple human thoughts. Hunger, anger, memory of laughter, and friends. He felt Mara's hand steadying him, and the entity recoiled slightly. His unpredictability confused it. They reached a corridor leading deeper into the ship. The walls here were darker, rougher, almost organic. The pulse of the hunger followed them, slower now, as if it had been frustrated by Evan's resistance. The air grew colder, heavier, and Evan felt the shadow of the entity pressing closer, though it remained unseen. Do you think we can fight it? Evan asked, voice shaking. Mara shook her head. Not directly. It is too powerful. But it feeds on certain things. If we deny it what it wants, fear, panic, control, it cannot dominate us completely. We can survive if we remain unpredictable. That is our advantage. Evan swallowed. Unpredictable. I can do that. I have to. The corridor split into two paths. One led downward into darkness, spiraling like the inside of a coil. The other sloped upward toward faint lights, flickering like distant stars. Evan hesitated, feeling the pull of the hunger stronger below. Something about that path drew him, whispering in his mind, promising pain and fear if he chose wrong. Mara touched his shoulder. The lights. It is safer. Maybe we can see its core or find a control point. It will be harder for it to reach us there. They moved toward the sloping corridor. The walls pulsed lightly as they passed, almost like they were breathing. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, stretching and twisting, disappearing when Evan looked directly. The pulse in the floor grew uneven, as if the ship itself were testing their resolve. As they climbed, Evan's mind swirled with alien whispers, images of darkness, memories that were not his own, pain that had lasted centuries. He fought to keep his thoughts human, messy, chaotic, resisting the probing. Mara's voice cut through the haze. Focus on yourself, Evan. Human. Alive. Strong. Defiant. Evan tightened his fists, clinging to the thought. Fear recoiled. Pain recoiled. The hunger hissed inside his mind, frustrated. He could feel its curiosity turning to irritation. His unpredictability was hurting it, weakening its control. They reached the top of the slope, entering another chamber. This one was smaller, circular, with low walls and strange machinery. The air was warmer here, though still thick with energy. Tubes from the central core reached into the walls, feeding some unknown process. The pulse of the hunger was slower here, less oppressive, as if the ship were less active in this space. Mara stepped forward to a console. This may be it. A control panel linked to the ship's internal systems. If we can manipulate it, we may slow the hunger or redirect its attention. Evan knelt beside her, eyes scanning the glowing buttons and screens. Symbols flashed rapidly, changing as the ship adjusted its internal systems. He realized then that the ship itself was alive in ways he had not understood. It could adapt, shift, respond, but it also had blind spots, spaces where it did not reach fully. A low voice hummed through the chamber. Interesting, persistent, defiant. Evan froze. The hunger's presence filled his mind, probing again, tasting, testing. But his thoughts remained human, messy, chaotic, alive. The entity recoiled. For the first time, he felt it hesitate. Mara pressed several buttons, the screen showing the layout of the ship. Sections of the corridors changed color. Paths shifted. Evan noticed that some of the shadows stopped moving, as if confused or redirected. "It is adapting," Mara whispered. "But we may have a chance." The pulse quickened again, but now unevenly. The ship seemed irritated, frustrated. Evan felt its attention narrowing on them, tasting their defiance. The hunger had never faced humans like this before. It expected fear, submission, control. But humans were unpredictable, messy, alive. Evan looked at Mara. "We can survive this, can't we?" Mara nodded slowly. "Yes. If we stay human. If we stay unpredictable. If we don't give it what it wants." The shadows in the corners of the chamber flickered and twisted. The pulse of the hunger grew stronger, searching for weaknesses, but the entity recoiled again, frustrated. Evan could feel it learning, adjusting, but failing to understand him fully. He smiled, weak but determined. For the first time, he felt a spark of power in the situation. The hunger was ancient, powerful, terrifying. But it could not break him completely. Not yet. The ship shifted again, corridors twisting and lights pulsing. Shadows stretched toward them, then disappeared. The pulse slowed slightly, uneven, confused. The hunger was watching, learning, frustrated, and Evan was alive. Mara pressed her hand to the console. "We need to move deeper. If we reach the core or the bridge, we may see a way to control or contain it, but we cannot stop moving." Evan nodded. Fear still pressed at him, but anger, defiance, and survival burned brighter. He was human, and that made him unpredictable. That made him dangerous to the hunger. That gave him hope. The shadows moved closer, and the pulse grew again, but Evan held fast. He was messy, human, alive, and defiant, and the hunger could not yet consume him. The corridor ahead twisted, narrow, and dark. The chamber hummed behind them, alive with power. The ship had noticed them. The hunger had tasted their minds. And it was curious, frustrated, hungry. Evan swallowed hard, gripping Mara's hand. The pulse of the ship vibrated through the floor, up his legs, into his chest. The hunger whispered again, tasting defiance. Interesting, unusual, alive. And Evan took a step forward. He was human. He was unpredictable. He was alive. And for the first time, he believed he could survive. Evan and Mara moved cautiously through the twisting corridor, the pulse of the ship vibrating beneath their feet. Every step was measured, slow, careful. The hunger followed, testing, probing, tasting their thoughts. Evan could feel it in his head again, pressing against his mind, trying to invade, trying to bend his thoughts into something it could consume. But he refused. He clung to the human chaos inside him. Fear, hope, anger, stubbornness, each emotion like a shield. The corridor twisted and narrowed, walls groaning and shifting as if alive. Shadows stretched along the metal surfaces, moving just at the edge of vision, bending with the light. The air smelled metallic and old. Evan's chest tightened, but he forced himself to breathe, each inhale a small act of defiance. Ahead, a low vibration ran through the floor. Mara paused, listening. "It knows we are here," she whispered. "It can feel us? It is hunting?" Evan swallowed. "Hunting?" Mara nodded, her face grim. "Yes, not like a predator on land. It hunts thoughts, fear, will. It wants to consume everything we are." The walls pulsed, bending slightly inward, as if they were closing in. Shadows flickered faster, darker shapes stretching along the corridor. Evan felt the pressure in his skull increase. Images flashed in his mind, dark tunnels, screaming humans, emptiness that lasted centuries. The hunger was trying to break him. "Keep moving," Mara said. Her voice was calm but firm. "Do not let it read you. Focus on human. Focus on alive." Evan nodded, though every step was a battle. The corridor led to a larger chamber, dimly lit, with machinery running along the walls. The hum here was louder, more aggressive. The pulse of the hunger beat stronger, as if the entity had realized it could not dominate easily. Mara moved to the center of the room and gestured to a series of controls embedded in the floor and walls. "These are old systems, but they are linked to the ship's core. If we can manipulate them, we may be able to slow it down." Evan looked at the controls. Symbols flashed across panels, some glowing blue, others red. It was confusing, chaotic, almost alive. He felt the hunger pressing harder now, trying to read them both. Its presence was everywhere, surrounding the room, filling the air, testing their minds. Mara's hand moved quickly across the panels. The symbols shifted, corridors on the ship's internal map glowing and changing color. The pulse of the hunger wavered, slightly slower, as if confused. "It is learning," she said quietly. "But it can still be slowed." Evan nodded, gripping the railing nearby. "Why is it so interested in me?" Mara glanced at him. "Because humans are unpredictable. Most species it consumes are orderly, easy to read. But you are messy, emotional, chaotic. That confuses it. That makes you dangerous." The shadows in the chamber stretched closer, darker now. Evan felt them at the edge of his vision, moving, twisting, almost tangible. The pressure in his head increased. He could feel the hunger tasting his thoughts, probing for weakness. "Stay human," Mara whispered. "Do not give it fear. Do not panic. Focus." Evan clutched her hand, closing his eyes briefly. He thought of simple things: air, warmth, survival, stubbornness. He imagined himself back on the station. His small apartment, the hum of the machines, the taste of cold food. He let those thoughts fill him. Messy, unpredictable, alive. The hunger recoiled. Its presence shivered and pulsed unevenly. The shadows flickered and pulled back slightly, confused by his resistance. Mara glanced at him. "Good. Keep it up. Every moment we resist, we weaken it." The chamber doors groaned and shifted. A low vibration ran through the floor again. The hunger was adapting. It realized they were not easy prey. Its presence pressed more insistently, trying to invade, to consume. Evan felt a sudden fear, sharp and piercing, but he refused it. He clenched his teeth and focused on anger, on survival, on defiance. The pressure in his skull lessened slightly. He was fighting it, mentally, using the chaos of being human against the entity. Mara moved toward another set of controls. "We can't stay here long. It will break through eventually. We need to reach the bridge or the core. If we can see it, maybe we can control it, confuse it, or trap it." Evan nodded. "And if we can't?" Mara's eyes were hard. "Then we vanish like the others, but we will not give it that. Not without a fight." The shadows moved again, faster now, swirling along the walls, corners, and floor. Evan could feel the hunger pressing against his mind with all its force. It tried to taste fear, confusion, despair. He resisted, letting only simple, chaotic human thoughts flow. Anger, stubbornness, defiance. The chamber shifted around them. Lights pulsed unevenly. The walls bent slightly, as if alive, as if breathing. The pulse of the hunger became irregular. It was learning, adapting, frustrated. It had never encountered humans like this before. Mara gestured to a small hatch on the side wall. "Through here. It leads deeper into the ship, closer to the core." Evan followed, heart pounding. The walls of the corridor beyond the hatch were narrower, darker, almost organic. Tubes and wires ran along the ceiling, pulsing with the ship's energy. The shadows moved at the edges of their vision, longer and darker, trying to intimidate, to scare. The pulse of the hunger grew, vibrating through the metal floor, into Evan's legs, chest, and head. Images invaded his mind. Endless darkness, screaming humans, centuries of waiting. The entity tried to consume, to dominate, to erase his thoughts. Evan clenched his fist. He forced himself to focus on simple human memories. Messy, chaotic, alive. The hum of machines, cold meals, stubborn fights, laughter, hope. The hunger recoiled slightly, frustrated, its presence wavering. Mara's voice cut through the tension. "Keep moving. Don't stop. Every step forward, every act of defiance weakens it." They reached a large circular chamber. The air was thick with energy. Tubes ran from the walls into a central core, glowing faintly blue. The pulse here was slower, uneven, irregular. The hunger's presence was strongest, pressing against their minds, tasting defiance, curiosity, and frustration. Evan stepped forward. "This is it," he whispered. "The heart of the ship." Mara nodded. "Yes, and the heart of the hunger. We need to understand it, to manipulate it, or we may never survive." The shadows moved closer, twisting along the walls and floor. The pulse grew faster now, uneven, almost panicked. The hunger was aware. It was frustrated. It could feel their defiance, the unpredictability of human thought, and it did not understand. Evan felt a spark of hope. He could resist it. He could survive. The entity had never faced humans like this. It expected fear, submission, control, but humans were chaotic, unpredictable, alive. That gave him power. Mara touched the console near the core. Symbols flashed and shifted. Corridors on the internal map changed color. Doors opened and closed. Paths shifted. The hunger's attention was divided, confused by the sudden unpredictability. Evan focused on his thoughts again. He let fear, anger, stubbornness, and hope mix together. He let them flow freely. The hunger recoiled, trying to understand, trying to consume, failing. The chamber pulsed with energy. Shadows stretched towards them, then recoiled. The ship groaned, alive and frustrated. The hunger's voice entered Evan's mind, deep and angry, defiant, unusual, alive. Evan stood taller. Mara's hand gripped his, steady and firm. They were alive. They were human. They were unpredictable. And the hunger could not consume them. Not yet. The pulse of the ship slowed slightly. The shadows hesitated. The entity was frustrated, learning, adapting, but it did not yet understand them fully. Mara pressed her hand to the console. "We can't stop. We need to move deeper, closer to the bridge or the control systems. If we reach them, we may confuse it, manipulate it, or trap it." Evan nodded. Fear still pressed at him, but anger, defiance, and survival burned stronger. He was human. He was alive. And the hunger had never faced humans like this before. The corridor ahead twisted, narrow, and the chamber hummed behind them, alive with energy. The shadows stretched and moved. The pulse of the hunger vibrated through the floor, into their bodies, into their minds. Evan took a deep breath. He was human. Messy, chaotic, defiant, alive. And for the first time, he believed he could survive. Evan and Mara stepped into the core chamber. The air was thick, heavy, and vibrating with energy. Tubes and cables ran from the walls into a massive glowing structure at the center. The light was faint blue, cold, and pulsating like a heartbeat. The pulse of the hunger was stronger here than anywhere else, pressing against their minds, tasting, probing, testing. Evan's chest tightened. His thoughts were messy, chaotic, alive, but the pressure was overwhelming. Images flooded his mind. Dark corridors, screaming humans, centuries of waiting. The hunger was trying to consume him. It wanted to erase him, to fold him into its hunger that had lasted 500 years, but he refused. He focused on stubbornness, anger, hope, and survival. The entity recoiled slightly. Mara moved quickly to a console at the edge of the chamber. Panels flickered to life, symbols flashing in colors Evan did not understand. She pressed buttons carefully, studying the shifting corridors and systems on the screen. "This is it," she said. "We may be able to manipulate the ship from here. We can redirect the hunger's attention or confuse it, but we must move fast." The pulse of the hunger grew uneven, stronger and faster, like it was angry and curious at the same time. Shadows stretched along the walls and floor, dark shapes moving just at the edge of their vision. The air seemed alive, twisting, bending, pressing. Evan felt it in his chest, in his head, in his stomach. It was everywhere. Evan swallowed hard. How do we fight something that is everywhere? Mara did not answer immediately. She moved her hand over the console, pressing buttons and shifting symbols. We don't fight it directly. We confuse it. We make it waste energy. We force it to react to unpredictability. That is our strength. The pulse of the hunger reacted instantly. The shadows flickered and twisted faster. A low, deep voice hummed inside Evan's mind. It was everywhere, deep and hungry. Defiant, fragile, defiant, unusual. Evan closed his eyes, focusing. He let simple human thoughts flow, stubbornness, defiance, anger, hope, survival. He let them mix together, messy, chaotic, The hunger recoiled, frustrated. Its voice hissed through his mind, tasting, probing, failing. Mara looked at him. Good. Keep it up. Every moment you resist, we gain time. Evan's hands trembled, but he forced himself to concentrate. The pulse in the room slowed slightly, uneven. The shadows twisted and shrank a little. The hunger was confused. It had never faced humans like this. It expected fear, panic, control, but humans were unpredictable, messy, alive. That was why Evan could resist. That was why they had hope. Mara pressed another sequence of buttons on the console. The tubes connected to the core began to shift, redirecting energy flows. Lights flickered across the chamber as corridors shifted on the internal map. The ship groaned, alive and frustrated. The hunger's pulse became irregular, as if it were struggling to adapt to the human chaos. The shadows in the corners moved closer, then recoiled. The hunger's voice entered Evan's mind again, sharper this time, tasting, probing, pressing. Curious, persistent, alive. Why do you resist? Evan clenched his fists. 'Cause I am human, he thought fiercely. He let anger, hope, stubbornness, and fear mix together. The hunger recoiled again, unable to consume his chaotic mind. Mara moved toward another panel. We need to find a way to contain it, or at least weaken it. It feeds on predictability. Humans are unpredictable. That is our advantage. We can use that. Evan nodded, focusing on the chaotic human thoughts inside him. The hunger's pulse became uneven, struggling to penetrate. It tried to taste fear, despair, and control, but all it found was messy, stubborn human thought. The chamber walls shifted, bending slightly, alive with energy. Shadows twisted along the edges. The ship groaned. The hunger's voice hissed in his mind. Impossible, so defiant. Alive. Unusual. Fascinating. Evan took a step forward. We are human. Messy, chaotic, alive, and we survive. Mara pressed a sequence of buttons that activated energy flows around the core. Tubes and cables glowed, redirecting the ship's power. The pulse of the hunger faltered. Shadows flickered and retreated slightly. The hunger hissed, tasting confusion, frustration, and unpredictability. Evan felt a spark of hope. They were not helpless. They could survive. They could fight back not with weapons, but with what made humans different. Messy thought, stubborn will, unpredictable emotion. The hunger pressed harder, stronger, trying to break through. Its presence filled the chamber, swirling around them, tasting, probing, pressing. But Evan's mind was a chaotic storm, messy and alive. The hunger recoiled, frustrated, weakening slightly. Mara moved closer to Evan. We need to finish this. If we can overload the core or redirect the energy flows, we may trap it, weaken it, or confuse it permanently. Evan nodded. I'm ready. They worked together, pressing panels, redirecting energy, manipulating the ship's systems. The lights flickered, tubes glowed, and corridors shifted. The pulse of the hunger became erratic, faster and slower, confused. Shadows twisted and bent, then shrank. The voice in Evan's mind hissed and recoiled. You... persistent, defiant, unusual. Evan clenched his fists, letting anger, stubbornness, and hope fill him. The hunger recoiled again. Its presence in the chamber weakened. The ship groaned, alive and frustrated, but responding to their manipulation. Mara pressed the final sequence of buttons. Energy flows around the core surged, glowing brighter, pulsing faster. The tube network around the chamber began to shift, redirecting power, isolating sections of the ship. The pulse of the hunger became uneven, slowing, weakening. Shadows flickered and twisted, then receded. Evan felt a rush of relief. The hunger's hold on the chamber was weakening. Its presence in his mind shrank slightly. For the first time, he felt it could be contained, confused, or even destroyed. Mara looked at him, her face serious but hopeful. We did it. For now. But it is not gone. It is still alive. It will recover, and it will learn. Evan nodded, breathing heavily. We survived. That is something. The chamber settled into a tense quiet. Shadows moved less. The pulse of the ship slowed, uneven but steady. The hunger was still present, but it had been weakened. It would recover, but Evan and Mara had proven something important. Humans were unpredictable. Chaotic, alive, and that made them difficult to consume. Mara turned to the console, scanning systems. We need to move toward the bridge. If we can reach the controls, we may be able to escape, or at least gain more leverage. Evan followed, still trembling slightly from the pressure of the hunger. His thoughts remained messy, chaotic, alive. He focused on survival, defiance, hope. The hunger's presence lingered, probing, tasting, frustrated. But for the first time, Evan felt a spark of confidence. He could resist it. He could survive it. They moved toward the next corridor, the chamber settling behind them. The shadows had not disappeared, and the pulse of the ship still beat with hunger, but Evan and Mara had gained an advantage. They had proven that human unpredictability, messy thought, and stubbornness were weapons the hunger could not fully understand. The ship shifted beneath their feet as they moved forward. Tubes and cables hummed with energy. Lights flickered and pulsed. The hunger's voice echoed faintly in Evan's mind. Persistent, unusual, alive, fascinating. Evan clenched his fists and focused on defiance. Mara's hand steadied him. They were alive. They were human. They were unpredictable. And for the first time, they believed they could win. Evan and Mara moved carefully through the shifting corridors, the pulse of the ship vibrating beneath their feet. The hunger was still present, its presence heavy and cold, pressing against their minds. Shadows flickered along the walls, moving at the edges of vision. Every step was tense, calculated, alive with risk. The bridge was ahead. Mara had seen it on the internal map, a large chamber filled with controls and observation panels. If they could reach it, they might control the ship fully, or at least manipulate the hunger further. But the entity was aware. Evan could feel its hunger pressing, probing, tasting their fear and defiance alike. Almost there, Mara whispered. We can do this, but stay focused. Messy, chaotic thoughts, alive. That is our weapon. Evan nodded, gripping her hand. His mind was a storm of human unpredictability. Anger, stubbornness, hope, fear, defiance. They all mingled, chaotic and unpredictable. Hunger tried to read him, to consume, to dominate. Its probing was sharp, insistent, but it recoiled at the human storm it could not understand. The corridor twisted sharply. The walls seemed to pulse, bending slightly as the ship reacted to their approach. Shadows stretched, reaching out, then recoiled. The pulse of the hunger grew uneven, faster and slower, like a heartbeat off rhythm. They reached a junction. One path led downward into darkness, a twisting spiral that seemed endless. The other rose toward faint light and a wide door. The bridge. The bridge? Mara said quietly. We have to take it. This may be our only chance to control the ship fully and escape. Evan took a deep breath. And if it's waiting for us there? Mara shook her head. Then we will meet it with what it cannot predict. We will use human chaos. That is all we have. They moved toward the bridge. The air grew heavier, almost solid, vibrating with energy. The shadows around them stretched and flickered. The pulse of the hunger grew stronger, pressing into their minds. Images flashed, darkness, screams, centuries of waiting, lives consumed. The hunger pressed harder, trying to dominate, to erase, to fold them into its endless hunger. Evan clenched his fists. He forced himself to think chaotic human thoughts. Fear, stubbornness, anger, hope, survival. The hunger recoiled. Its probing faltered, confused by the unpredictability, the messy chaos of human thought. They reached the wide door to the bridge. Mara pressed a control panel. The door slid open slowly, revealing a large chamber filled with observation panels and controls. Tubes and cables ran from the walls and ceiling into a central console that glowed faintly blue. The pulse of the hunger was strongest here, near the core of the ship. Shadows flickered along the walls. The hunger's presence pressed heavily into their minds, tasting defiance, curiosity, and frustration. It hissed, deep and slow, trying to read, to consume, to dominate. Evan stepped forward, gripping Mara's hand. This is it, he whispered. The heart of the ship. Mara moved quickly to the central console. We have to manipulate it, redirect energy, confuse it, force it to react to human unpredictability. That is our only chance. Evan's mind was chaotic, full of anger, hope, stubbornness, and fear. The hunger pressed harder, tasting, probing, pressing. Its pulse grew uneven, faster and slower, frustrated by the unpredictable storm inside Evan's mind. Mara pressed buttons and shifted controls. The tubes and cables feeding the core glowed brighter, energy flows redirected. Corridors shifted on the internal map. Shadows twisted, bent, and then shrank slightly. The hunger recoiled, frustrated by the sudden chaos, the human unpredictability it could not control. Keep focusing, Mara shouted. Messy human. Alive. Evan's chest tightened. Images flashed in his mind. His childhood, the station, simple human memories, anger, stubbornness, hope, fear, they all mixed together. The hunger recoiled again, tasting confusion, frustration, unpredictability. Its voice hissed in his mind, sharp and deep. You, defiant, unusual, alive, fascinating. Evan took a step forward, letting chaos flow through him. He felt power in his defiance, strength in human unpredictability. The hunger pressed harder, but it faltered. Shadows twisted and recoiled, and the pulse of the ship became uneven. Mara's hands moved rapidly over the console. Energy flows shifted fully toward containment systems. Tubes and cables around the core pulsed, redirecting power. The ship groaned, alive and frustrated. The hunger's pulse slowed slightly. It was weakening. Almost there, Mara said. We have to push it fully into the containment systems. If we succeed, it may be trapped, or at least weakened enough for us to escape. Evan focused every thought on chaos, unpredictability, defiance. The hunger recoiled in his mind, tasting the human storm it could not dominate. Its pulse faltered, faster and slower, uneven, uncertain. Shadows twisted and bent, then shrank. Mara pressed the final sequence of buttons. Energy surged around the core, glowing tubes and cables pulsing with power. The pulse of the hunger faltered, weakening. The shadows flickered and disappeared. The voice hissed faintly, confused, frustrated. Evan felt relief, though his chest still burned from the pressure. The hunger was weakened. It had been forced to react to human unpredictability, to chaotic thought, to stubborn defiance. For the first time, Evan felt that the entity could not consume them fully. Not yet. Mara turned to him. We did it. For now. But it is not gone. It will recover. It will learn. But humans are different. Messy, chaotic, alive. That is why we survived. Evan nodded, breathing heavily. We survived. And we learned something. We can fight it, even if it is ancient and powerful. The bridge settled into a tense quiet. Tubes glowed faintly, systems hummed with redirected energy, and the pulse of the hunger was weaker, uneven, confused. Shadows no longer twisted around them. The ship was still alive, still aware, but Evan and Mara had proven that human unpredictability, messy thought, and stubborn defiance were weapons the hunger could not fully comprehend. They moved toward the observation panels, seeing the corridors of the ship shift and pulse with energy. The path to escape was still uncertain, but it existed. The hunger was weakened, confused, frustrated. They had survived its test, proven the strength of human chaos. Evan looked at Mara. Do you think it will come after us again? Mara's eyes were serious. It will. It is patient. It learns. But it will never understand humans fully. That is why we survived. That is why we can continue to survive. Evan swallowed. He felt the weight of what had happened. They had faced a 50-year-old entity that had consumed countless minds, that had waited centuries, that had hunted and devoured without mercy. And they had survived. Not through weapons, not through power, but through chaos, unpredictability, and stubborn human defiance. Mara guided him to the bridge controls. We can manipulate the ship now. We can find a route home, or at least away from its core. But we must remain vigilant. It is still alive, and it still hungers. Evan nodded, feeling a spark of determination. Then we stay human, messy, unpredictable, alive, and we survive. The ship hummed around them, alive, aware, frustrated. The shadows had receded. The pulse of the hunger was uneven, weaker, confused by the chaotic human presence it could not dominate. Evan and Mara worked together, plotting a course, manipulating the ship, redirecting systems. The hunger watched, probed, tasted frustration, but it recoiled at the human chaos. And for the first time, Evan realized that humans, despite their fragility, their emotions, their fear, could resist even an ancient, unstoppable entity. Humans were messy, chaotic, unpredictable, and alive, and that made them dangerous. That made them powerful. The ship shifted beneath their feet, tubes glowed. Lights pulsed. The hunger recoiled again, testing, probing, frustrated. But Evan and Mara had proven the strength of human unpredictability. Evan clenched his fists. We are human, messy, chaotic, alive, and we survive. Mara smiled faintly. Yes, and that is why we always will. The ship moved forward. The hunger's pulse continued, weaker and irregular. Shadows flickered faintly, but no longer threatened. Evan and Mara had survived. Against a 500-year-old entity, they had prevailed. Not through weapons, not through strength, but through the messy, unpredictable chaos of humanity. And as the bridge lights pulsed softly, Evan knew one thing. Humans were alive, defiant, unpredictable. And nothing, not even a 500-year hunger, could ever fully consume that.